The US poverty rate has increased in America for the first time since 2010. We're going to be talking about that today here on the Left Wing. My name is Desmond Price, host of the Independent Thought Podcast, and joined by guest for this segment, Fresh Faces, New Ideas. So we have this article here from The Hill. It says that the poverty rate in the United States rose by 4.6 percentage points in 2022. This is according to data from the Census Bureau. Now, the supplemental poverty measure, which measures income and benefits plus government programs such as tax refunds and food stamps, said that this rose to 12.4% in 2022. Now, the data also found that child poverty rate more than doubled from 5.2% in 2021 to 12.4% in 2022. Now, these rates also increased for people ages 18 to 64 and 65 and older. President Biden has attributed the sharp rise in poverty last year to the end of pandemic-era child tax credit expansion. He said, quote, "Today's census report shows the dire consequences of the congressional Republicans' refusal to extend the enhanced child tax credit, even as they advance costly corporate tax cuts." He said in a statement on Tuesday, "We can cut child poverty by nearly half to record lows for all children in the nation, largely by expanding the child tax credit. And last year, congressional Republicans insisted on raising taxes on families with children." The rise reported today in child poverty is no accident. It is the result of a deliberate policy choice congressional Republicans made to block help for families with children while advancing massive tax cuts for the wealthiest and the largest corporations. And he went on to say no child should grow up in poverty. Now, I will cap this off with this. Democrats fought unsuccessfully last year to extend the expanded version of the child tax credit, which expired in December. The child tax credit boosted the credit eligible parents could receive to $3,000 per child every month. And then, there was also $3,600 per child if the child was younger than 6. So, fresh faces. Let's talk about this. The pro-life party said that they just did not want to have the child tax credit anymore. Is the blame solely on the Republicans here for what is happening with childhood poverty and for US and for poverty as a whole going up in America? Or do the Democrats bear some blame as well?
They bear some blame, but we have to be very clear about this. Childhood poverty is a pillar of the Republican Party. This is not like exaggeration. They literally have it as a rolling back of free childcare, free meals in like schools in their platforms in at least a couple states. I don't know if there's national, but that's what it stands like. It is. They don't. It is very obvious. Like, it's so easy to be like, oh, you're the pro-life party, but you don't actually give a shit once the baby is more than just like a thought. Like even when it's an actual fetus, you don't care about the fetus. That's why you don't expand maternal care or maternity leave or paternity leave or access to Medicare or any type of shit like that. You just like the concept of there being a baby. But yeah, no, it is directly the policy of the Republican Party to have kids starving, and that's why they want them to go back to the mines like they did in Arkansas. Where is the Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor?
That's Arkansas. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's the thing. They don't want them. They don't want them in school. They want them in the mines because that way it's a way to undercut labor. They also just don't think they should be fed because fuck them. But yeah, on the Democratic side, there needs to be two things. One, there's a special place in hell for Joe Manchin. No, like people could conflate him in cinema, but like Joe Manchin's sole goal is to make things worse for people who aren't Joe Manchin. The incalculable number of people who have been hurt by his family's spiking of the EpiPen prices is like unbelievable. Like, to be clear, I'm an EMT. One of the things that we go over when you're being an EMT and then in the orientation for my company is we don't carry EpiPens any longer because every time you have one, you need 2. And it costs about $1,200 each. And then you have to keep replacing them. And then you multiply that by, I think we have 20 trucks. That's just that. So it's easier to buy just literal barrels of epinephrine and learn how to take it out of that because they
Wow.
spiked the price of everything so much. Now, the other thing is Joe Manchin's reasoning for why the childhood tax credit was bad is they didn't want parents buying drugs.
Yeah, wow. You know what? I remember him saying that. That literally floored me. And I think that should have been in the news cycle longer than it was.
Because it's not a real, he doesn't have real concerns about things that are real. Like, there is no evidence of this. If you wanted to make that argument, especially like because it was like a year-long program, you have data for what the people were doing with it. And you could say, here, Joe, this is the data. It turns out they were buying food, paying off bills, buying clothing, whatever. And I'm sure there'll be some outlying data of like somebody bought a Maserati, or somebody bought it like a something stupid like 40 black flat screen. Like, there's always data like that, because here's the thing: people are going to misuse money in general. Like, but it's their fucking money. It's their choice to do that. The point is, if the policy itself is sound and the benefits outweigh the 1%, 2% of whatever the number is, but we're talking minuscule number of people who misuse it. And this expands into just how we deal with poverty and homelessness in itself. Like, the idea that everyone should have a house also includes the people who have no desire to turn their lives around in any way, shape, or form. They still deserve to have a house, even if they're not productive to society, or they're just like strung out on drugs forever, or they like whatever. Like, they still don't deserve to be in the street. Like,
Yeah.
that is the overall issue, that we let this like minuscule percentage of slight misuse upend. Like, we double child poverty. Like, the fact that this minuscule program cut child poverty in half just shows that it's a choice. And if we care about children, which we don't, like, let's be very clear: the United States of America does not give a flying fuck about children. We just don't. Like, every policy we have about it shows that. I mean,
Right.
there are
And
individual
that's,
states
yeah.
that like care a little bit more, but overall we don't. Like, it was made very, very clear in the pandemic. We don't care about their schooling. We don't care about their ability to eat. I think it was like 20% of New York kids have to have their meals from the schools, and they were like panicking during the pandemic, like, how are we going to feed these kids? It's a disaster that we had to do this, and it was so like the first month it like doubled, and like it never got better. And I hope that somebody goes like, hey, Joe Manchin, are you happy about this? And he'll be like, well, the deficit, and be like, no, Joe Manchin, you directly did this. And every single Republican, when they say they're pro-life, like, how do you feel about this? And this is all just the child poverty thing. Like, the reason people are suffering more, in even though the economic numbers look good for like unemployment and inflation starting to come down, is because for like the first time, at least in my lifetime that I could think of, we had like a social safety net that people could rely on. That wasn't like jumping through a million hoops or like really fucked up or inefficient. We had one that had a lot of different ways, with the expanded unemployment. We had the child tax credit. There was just a lot of ways to help people. The student debt being frozen, all of these things, the rent moratoriums. There was just a lot of stuff there that was able to help people get onto their feet. And then the idea for a lot of this was, because I remember making this argument of,
Right.
this is
Actually, let me
really
stop you right there, because I think we're kind of getting into a bunch of different subjects here. This is actually why I wanted to ask that question originally, about whose fault is it, Republicans or Democrats? And we're talking about these pandemic era programs. Like you mentioned, there's the Joe Manchins of the world who publicly went out and said like, hey, I'm afraid that people are going to use the child tax credit for, I think he specifically said he thought that the parents were going to buy drugs with it, right? But I also want to know, like, we know who the Republicans are. Like, they are, like, as you mentioned, this is the party that is in states like Arkansas and states like Iowa, and there are other states in the country where they are trying to roll back child labor laws, where they are openly saying things like it is their 2024 priority to eliminate free school meals. Like, they openly stating something like that. We know who they are. The question is, why aren't the Democrats putting up more of a fight to keep these programs in place? That's the question that I ask myself. When Joe Manchin was, blocking the child tax credit from having a chance to be, I guess, to be renewed for another year, why didn't Joe Biden come down harder on him? Why didn't he drag him through the coals in the media? Why didn't the other Democrats drag him through the coals in the media? Why were they all so quiet and complicit while this was happening? And should we lay some of the blame at their feet for the fact that they kind of quietly went into the night while all of these pandemic era programs that were truly helping people just faded away, and now people are struggling because of it?
Kind of. So I don't really think there was anything Joe Biden could have said that would have changed Joe Manchin's mind. Like, we have to remember a lot of when this stuff like expired was with a 50-50 Senate. And like, we kind of needed Joe Manchin.
Right.
So that like, this is why lefties are mad at Biden. And I understand that, but there's like things that you have to understand, like the stuff that he got accomplished with this Senate is important, and it's good wins that can be built on in 24 because a whole host of reasons. I truly believe they're going to have either super majorities in both chambers or close to it. They have to.
And when you say they, who do you mean?
Oh, I think the Democrats. I think we may get to this later, but like this is my belief about how, especially if they shut the government down, like they're and like Donald Trump. It's a long diatribe of both, but like he had to deal with Joe Manchin, so you kind of had to put up with this nonsense, and then they lost the House, and then like even putting it back on like the as a bill and stuff is kind of like meaningless. It would never pass anything. Like, obviously they could pass it and make it as like a symbolic thing and say, hey, in 2024 we're going to re-up the child tax credit, because we don't need to worry about cinema's not going to be in Senate in 2024. Joe Manchin might not be in either, but like we have 51, so like we could pass this without one of those chuckleheads. Like they could pass these, like similar to the House did in 2018 to 2020, where they passed a whole bunch of like priority bills that like, here are the things that we're going to do. Obviously, those priority bills changed a lot because in between 2018 and 2021, there was a fucking pandemic. And that changed a lot of the priorities. But yeah, I don't know how much of this the federal government itself could have stabilized and tried to do, because I know the rent moratorium, the Supreme Court struck it down, and then he tried to do it another way, and I don't know how well that stuck. I know they had to give up the student debt thing was in for the debt ceiling, which shouldn't have been an issue, but that's a totally different conversation. Like, there are aspects of this that just not knowing how they were like rolled out and like the specific policy wonk stuff. I cannot say that the federal government couldn't have done more, or Joe Biden could have had like the EPA do something like is in the IRA. They changed they changed carbon to a pollutant, so that the EPA still function, even though the Supreme Court said it couldn't function in the same way. Like, I don't know how much of that he could be doing, just because I don't have the policy understanding at that level. But yeah, okay, it is a problem. I think a lot of it is because they didn't have the numbers when they needed them, and now they don't have the House. But yeah, it is a good example, and hopefully that when they run some of these candidates, they'll run on these incredibly popularity, because it should be shouted from the rooftops that, hey, we did this. There were literally 5 Republicans in the House standing in the way of you and getting a child tax credit. Like, that's should be an easy 2024 priority.
You would think so. And I think that's actually kind of how I wanted to like round out this conversation here. When it comes to programs like the child tax credit, when it comes to these easy wins that you would think would be slam dunks for the Democrats, they could be going around the country right now, essentially like shouting to the high moons about exactly how good of a program that was, how beneficial it was for people, how bad it is now that we don't have it, and who's to blame for the fact that we don't have it. It's not that hard of a strategy to implement, and yet they don't do it. And there's no logical reason to not do it.
I think there is a logical reason. I think there's kind of a lot of other dumb shit going on that's taking up a lot of the oxygen. Like this,
You know what?
to be fair,
I was gonna say, I don't know. I want to push back on that a little bit because I think everyone's chief complaint right now is their financial standing in this country. Whether they're talking about inflation or they're talking about rising housing prices, talking about wages. Like the bottom line is the economy isn't working for everyday people. It might be working for the upper class, for people making 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures a year, sure. But if you're not in that class, the economy is not working that well for you right now. And so I think when we're talking about the aid that people felt like they needed to survive, when you're talking about like why that's not there anymore, it's a pretty powerful message to be talking about that. And I think the Democrats do themselves a disservice by not doing so. And frankly, Joe Biden has the loudest microphone in the country, in the world. He doesn't use it.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a general thing. He doesn't have he just doesn't use it in a way that we, especially on the left, would hope that he would use it. And look, there's only one Bernie, but other people could be making this argument as well. And I think part of the calculus is there's little more, because the other thing is if they start trumpeting this as like a Republican only thing. There was that Bernie bill there, or that amendment to reinstitutionalize it that lost 97-1. So like it's not just like it's not cut and dry 51-49 type
No,
shit.
it's not.
Like they can muddy the water on this a little bit more. Obviously, if you still want to have that fight, I still think having like when the $15 minimum wage got shut down because there was the 8 Democrats, I still think you should have had that fight. But yeah, I agree. They should be doing more on this. I think it would probably behoove them to do it. And I think, but again, part of the issue is there's only so much oxygen that can be taken up, and a lot of it is going to be taken up over the next like obviously if when he's going to like Pittsburgh and stuff and doing rallies, he could talk about this and stuff. But like the news isn't gonna like Fox isn't gonna cover it, but CNN, they're not gonna cover this shit either. Like it the thing that's going to be covered over the next 2 months is going to be whatever happens with the shutdown, whatever happens with the clown impeachment, whatever infinite court case that Donald Trump gets caught in, if depending on what happens with the UAE strike, or the UAW strike, that, and then I don't know, some convict's going to escape again, and they'll cover that for 2 weeks. It's more of a trying to figure out how to make it into a something that sucks up oxygen.
Yeah.
And also you have to factor in every 10 minutes they have to ask, well, Joe Biden's old. Like, what is Joe Biden supposed to answer? Like, can Joe Biden answer being old? Like, stop time. Like, the fuck I know.